Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here at the podcast. And today we are going to be playing back for you by popular demand, believe it or not. We were at the AIAG conference last week, exactly a week ago. We were at the AIAG conference a couple of days after the election. And this took place in Detroit. And Andy had a keynote speech that he did during the lunch hour. And we had several people ask me if I was going to play this or produce this, publish it for the podcast. I was really not planning on doing that. I was planning on just putting it as a clip or a gem, like we do have on our YouTube channel. But several people came up to me, so I changed my mind. So what I'm doing here for this episode is that I'm going to combine a few things. So we're going to start off with Miriam Cronk. She is the committee chair for AIAG that put together this whole town hall for trade and customs. It was a really good event, by the way, and hopefully y'all may take a look and see if you may want to participate next year. But they were at 300 attendees, more or less, I think, something like that. So it was a really good event. Like I said, it was very different from what we've been to, like, say, ICPA or NCBFAA, for obvious reasons, being the automotive industry. But aside from that, we also got to see a few different perspectives on things that we always hear or listen to, like forced labor, for example, or any other issues that may CTPAT. That's another good example. So anyway, it was a good event. This episode is we're going to kick it off with a quick interview we did with Miriam Cronk. Then we're going to transition into Andy's keynote that he had during lunch, which, by the way, there was a component, a PowerPoint component to that. If you're listening or seeing or watching this on YouTube, we will have on the notes the PowerPoint that you can download in case you want to either A, follow along, or B, just look at all the numbers. That speech, by the way, is chock full of numbers. We will end this episode with an interview that we did with the CEO of AIAG, Matt. So Matt will be joining us to close the episode, just to talk a little bit about AIAG, and what their group works on and advocates for, et cetera. So thank you very much again for being part of our audience. And had it not been for several of you that listen into the podcast that attended the event, I don't know if we would have aired this, but thank you for being loyal listeners and wanting to listen to this type of content. So we hope you enjoy, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Hey folks, we're here with the AIAG Conference. This is Andy Shiles with SimplyTrade Podcast, and thanks to MIC Customs, they have sponsored us on being here. And thank goodness for Miriam here. She is taking on, and I guess you're the head chief here for this conference, aren't you? For today, yes. It's been, we have a great audience after several years being here together. We have approximately, I was told, close to 300 in our audience. Yeah. So all from the automotive industry. We've listened now to Director Dina Amato and Dina Baker Hill, and we have Alex. Touching all these pressing topics, right? Mm-hmm. And that's important. Important. Well, and the thing is that with this, it's a nice conference. So this is one of those AIAG Automotive Industry Action Group, right?
Exactly.
I got it right.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah, I'm like, my memory is about as long as a turtle's tail here. Yeah. So it's like, all right, so I got that right, folks.
Yeah.
Hey, as far as the folks here, it's dedicated predominantly with the automotive industry.
Yes, we have OEMs, tiers, and we have brokers, of course, this being customs and trade, right? We have a little bit of everything. It's such a large industry, and the real cool thing here in Metro Detroit, we tend to be kind of like recycle, but we all support one another.
We all know each other, and it's a really dynamic group.
Well, this is our first visit here, so thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for coming.
And we're looking forward to it. This is a great little conference here, and I say little, 300 people, but it's like people are interacting. This is one where I don't see the stiff neck kind of a deal. It's like it's very relaxed. People are interacting really well.
The day is gorgeous. In November, a day in Metro Detroit. So we're, and again, for ourselves just getting together, it's been a while, so it's just nice to touch base. And with our recent election, some hot pressing topics. We have a phenomenal rock star agenda, yourself included. So I'm looking forward to listening to you at lunchtime.
Let's hold that judgment till after the speech, and we'll see if it's going to be worthwhile. Well, all said and done it's a full day of good speakers, good topics. We're looking forward to it. So for the next go-round, if somebody is interested in AIAG, and they're in the industry, supplier, whatever, why AIAG? I can't get that out.
That's okay. It's a mouthful, I know.
But just real quick, what is it that you're promoting? Is it just to get together and rub elbows, or what are you doing here?
Well, here's the thing. We are the largest trade association in the automotive industry. And of course, situating here in Metro Detroit, not only supply chain, like in customs and trade, I have a colleague who handles, finished vehicles, electrical vehicles. We are the go-to thought process. We have over 5,000 volunteers, and it's just that to share with industry audience of the happenings that's going on. They create publications, referred to checklists. We do the webinars via all our volunteers. So being a member of AIG or even being a non-member, it's all on a positive note. And it's always expanding, just that. We're global, so always welcome.
All right.
Yeah.
AIAG, what, .org?
.org.
There you go. If you're interested, check it out. With that, we're going to turn it back over. Hope you all have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
To move into a whole new realm of things. So one of the things, how many of you want to see the 232 tariffs pulled and get rid of those aluminum and steel tariffs? It's kind of mixed, whatever, they're in there. Well, and then you got the 301s, you get all this kind of stuff. The one thing that I'm going to talk to you about is, as far as, from my opinion now, and understand this, I'm dumb as a box of rocks, so I have to look and break things down into more common sense terms. I'm going to give you some facts that I've looked at. I'm hoping that it will be well received here, because when we talk about it, I do not believe that U.S. goods are treated fairly abroad. Now I'm talking U.S. manufactured goods. With that, how easy is it to take a U.S. manufactured item, we'll say vehicles, and send it to India? There's some and importing a U.S. manufactured vehicle into India or Japan. How about Germany? A little easier. Well, that's some of the things that I'm looking at. But yet, if you take any of their vehicles and you bring them into the U.S., there's some bureaucracy, there's no question. But by far, it is much easier, is it not? So let's talk about it a little bit. As far as I got to put on I'll tell you what, getting old sucks eggs, doesn't it? So I'm going to put this back in here for a minute. Okay, so as far as the first slide here, I was talking about, if you're looking and following on the app, it's just talking about the amount of trade. The amount of trade is, even just 5 years, has grown significantly. I mean, we're talking billions and billions goes in there, but the last couple of years have been kind of stagnant in the overall things. Exports are beginning to show some improvement, but in 2022, we had one level of trade, and then 23, actually, there was a depression, if you want to, or recession, whatever you want to call it, in the international logistics and trade and whatnot. So volumes actually dropped during that time frame. But in overall trade, in 22, we had $7 trillion in total trade, imports and exports added together. 6.9 trillion in 23, and now it's estimated to be 7.2 trillion here in 24. Now, there could have been some factors in there. You remember the Panama Canal with the drought? That impeded frequencies of ships. The threat of by the longshoremen on the western region, that had an impact on how quickly some of the supplies of raw goods and different products came through. So in looking at it overall, though, as far as the trade, we have the trade deficit. I'm going to jump forward here because as far as there's a bar graph, and this goes easier if it was projected, but it's 3.9 trillion is what we're importing versus 3 trillion in 2022. 3.8 trillion drops on imports down to, and 3 trillion again on exports. Our exports, though, it just seems to be 3 trillion. We can't seem to go any higher, any lower. Gets a little bit better maybe and all of that. All right. But talking about trade deficits, regardless if we have a great year or a bad year economically, our trade deficit seems to be it sucks wind. I'll just tell you, what does a trade deficit mean? Trade deficit means we're importing more than we export. Now, imports are not bad, but I'll say this. I don't want to sacrifice getting cheap imports at the expense of U.S. exports. What do I mean by that? U.S. exports, we still have to compete on the global market. Price, quality, cycle times, obviously customer service as far as things go out there and all of that, just like everybody else does. Everybody seems to want to have access to the U.S. market. But when we turn around and want to reciprocate, there seems to be either tariffs on our goods or non-tariff trade barriers. And that's what we get into. So with the deficit, trade deficit, that is. Here's one thing. Who do you think leads the effort? Which country do we have the largest trade deficit with? I'm not sure everybody's about to shout it at the same time, but what? China. Good point. The one thing that I will say, our trade deficit right now is $785 billion. That means we're importing $780 billion more than we're exporting. Okay. China accounts for 23% of that one country, 23%. But do you want to know if the 301 tariffs, and I will quite frankly say, I think the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act probably has an effect on it. What do you think that their account of the trade deficit was in 2016? Now, if you cheat, you're going to look at the presentation. 47%. So, as far as what I'm getting at is that there was a focus on this, and why would we use additional tariffs on somebody? The objective is to use that as a tool to try and change the behavior of a country. Right? And hopefully, to influence them, stop using slave labor. That's what it boils down to, right? Well, the other thing is also talking about fair trade. When I say free trade, everybody wants free trade. Well, the general assumption is if you say free trade, it's duty free. Yeah. Well, that's an aspect of it. But it's also having free access to the market. How many of you know about the World Trade Organization, WTO? All right, with the WTO, the concept is to be a member of the WTO, you're supposed to be opening up your markets, looking at reducing tariffs, but also opening your markets to other countries. I forget the year, but I know both China and Russia were added to the WTO. How many of you believe Russia has, now I know there's a problem with the war with Russia, but a while back, how many of you believe that Russia had an open market? Not really. That was an extremely difficult country to get into. The same thing with China. How many of you believe that China has opened up their market? And yet they're a member of the WTO. They're supposed to be open. It's not just a U.S. thing. This is all countries. China's playing hardball with everybody. And you know what? They're China first. Okay. But as we're dealing with that, that's something to give some thought to. Here's my objective as I'm going through this. I'm not trying to convince you that we should or should not be taking action regarding a certain country or certain policies or anything like that. What I'm hoping to do is stimulate your thoughts so that when it comes to your strategic development of your regulatory and industry affairs and government affairs, that you're going to look at things holistically. I come back to the aluminum and steel tariffs. That's a big deal in the automotive industry. And it would make things a lot easier if we didn't have to worry about that. However, instead of just focusing on that specifically, if we looked at the situation holistically and see if we can influence stimulating trade for U.S. companies, in this particular case, both ways, you would have a greater shot at getting those tariffs removed on the aluminum and steel. Where I'm going is agriculture or fashion industry or whatever else has nothing to do necessarily directly with your industry, but that's where I'm going. So that's what my objective is to get you to thinking about this. So talking about the trade deficit again, Mexico now accounts for 12.8%, up from 8.9% in the trade deficit in 2016. What does that mean? Well, our trade with China actually has been reduced. We were doing about $600 billion in trade, total trade with China in 2016. We're at 369 billion. So people are moving away from China as far as total trade and things of that nature, but they're going to other places. So let's pick it up. Again, still, I don't want to come across to say imports are bad, and a trade deficit necessarily doesn't mean it's totally bad, because I'm going to get to the size of our economy in a minute. But it has to come into play here and look at it. But here's one of the other things. Vietnam now has come out of nowhere, and they're at 8.5% of the trade deficit. Now, their economy is not even in the top 15. And yet they are, number 1, 2, 3, third largest in the deficit, not counting the European Union as a whole. Germany, their trade deficit accounts for 7.1%. It actually has shrunk since 2016. They used to be 8%. Well, all this trade deficit, all I'm getting at is getting you to think about it. So, talk about economies. How big is the U.S. economy?
27, 32.
27 million?
So U.S. economy, 27 trillion.
27 trillion. He's right on the, you must have looked. No. 27 trillion, it is. That's out. We're the largest economy in the world. China's the second largest. What do you think they are?
20.
20? Any other guesses? They are basically 18 trillion. Okay? So the U.S., 27, China's about 18. Who's the third and fourth largest economies in the world? Just take a guess. Japan and Germany? Germany? Yeah, you're right. Japan and Germany. So their economies are 4.4 in Germany and 4.2 trillion. So stop and think about that. 27 trillion. And the third, 4.2 4 trillion. So, I mean, the U.S. and China dwarf the economies of everybody else. Everybody wants access to the largest economy in the world. That's us. Great. Is it not fair to think that we should also be asking for those full access to the second largest economy in the world? It's things of that's where I'm going with this, okay? Now, how many of you are probably familiar with this, but if you were to take a U.S. manufactured vehicle, could be actually a Japanese vehicle or any other country, and send it to Germany, what would be the duty and tax rate for that vehicle?
10%.
10%?
And after that, something about 30?
About 30? Yeah, I was talking duties and taxes with that. So 30%, that's pretty valid. What if we took a Mercedes and brought it in here? What's the duty rate on a Mercedes?
Well, see, I didn't.
2.5.
What about a pickup truck?
With
the seats?
Tit for tat here. But, I mean, in all seriousness, even with all that, that's where we're looking at this. All right, so 2.5%. So let's just say it's 5% by the time you add all the ancillary other stuff that you have to put into it. 30%, 5%.
25% for that pickup.
And 25% for the pickup. But the point being is when you're looking at it, as you're trying to deal with that, is it fair? I mean, part of the higher rates come from initially, after World War II, Germany was setting those rates high. Why? Because they were trying to rebuild their domestic economy, and they were trying to protect it. Last time I checked, I think Germany has recovered from World War II, don't you? All I'm getting at, folks, is we need to talk through this kind of stuff. Talking about energy, you talk about, the automotive, you're talking about fashion and things of that nature. Here's the other thing, though. The total amount of exports by country. Who do you think, just in general, they can export anywhere in the world? Who totals the list of exporting from their country? Germany's one. China. China is the first one. In total dollars now, we're not talking percentage. We're talking total dollars. They are 3.7 trillion is what they export. U.S. is next in total dollars of 3.17 trillion. And then Germany is 2.2 trillion. Now remember the size of the economies? Germany was 4.4 trillion in total economy, and they're exporting 2.2 trillion. So now this is where we can do apples to apples comparison. The percent of their economy tied to exports. Excuse me. The percent. The average, and get this, folks, is 31% of all the economies. 31% of an economy is tied to exports. But here's what really gets me. The U.S., of the top 15, we export 11.6% of our totals. Okay? But then China, they're at 20%, almost 21%. Mexico, their economy is tied to 43% of their economy is tied to exports. But the kicker to me was Germany at 50%. Now, in 2016, Germany's economy was exporting at 38%. They still led the highest as far as exports to their economy. But that's astronomical, folks. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's good. But what does that mean? Half of their economy comes from other people's money and goes back to their country. So that's where it comes into. Now, let's get into China. If we were going to deal with this trade deficit to try and balance that out a little bit, the top commodities, this is from China. This is what we're importing in. Electronic equipment, if I can say, sorry. Machinery, furniture, toys, plastics, things of that nature. Going to China, they're buying aircraft and spacecraft parts, vehicles, oilseed, machinery, electronic equipment, medical tech, things of that nature. Part of the thing on this, though, is what to do and what would we look at. The forced labor prevention, obviously that's still kicking in. Intellectual property rights, you don't hear that too much anymore because of the forced labor, but that is, you design something, you go over there and you have them manufacture it, and within a few years there's knockoffs. Is that fair? No. Gee, wait a minute. They're a member of what? WTO. Part of the World Trade Organization is to help protect all that. They're a member, but even the WTO is not holding them accountable, as well as some other countries. So we spent all this time trying to regulate, talk. Somebody needs to go with a boot up to somebody's backside and go, wait a minute, right? But that's just one of the things to look at to figure out what should we do. All right, the others. Mexico. We're importing vehicles, electronic equipment, machinery, medical equipment, things of that nature. What do we sell to Mexico? Machinery, electronic equipment, minerals and fuels, vehicles, things of that nature. As far as dealing with a strategy, give this advice, development of the USMCA trade agreement. Well, it's time for renewal on some of that. Maybe we need to fine tune some of that. Again, the whole thing too is remember North American content, and you know this, I'm preaching to the choir on this one. The North American content is supposed to go on up to 75%. Have I got that right? It went from 60 to 75, I believe. Why is it that we can't say to hit that mark?
Go ahead.
It would stimulate business in Canada, US, and Mexico, and in all three countries. That was the whole idea behind that. And yet, somebody's cutting corner this way or that way or whatever. And of course, the other side is I was talking to somebody, matter of fact, it was Alberto, I think it was you, but we were talking earlier, where somebody sets everything up and he qualifies for the USMCA, and next thing you know, somebody then sources, well, I can get this part cheaper from China, Malaysia, Vietnam, whatever, and they bring it in, and all of a sudden the percent content drops. Here's my point with that conversation. It no longer qualifies. It has negative repercussions, but the purchasing, sourcing guy is looked at it and go, hey, I got bigger, better, faster, cheaper. I've saved a few pennies off of this one part. You just cost us 50% more. Look at things holistically. That's all I'm getting at here. The trade. Over 33 million jobs, probably even more than that. But here's what it boils down to. For every $1 billion in trade, equates to 10,000 jobs. Okay? So, remember the percent of our economy tied to exports was 11%. The average of all the top economies is 31%. If we even doubled, that'd be 22%. Let's say we just went to 20% of our economy would be tied to exports. Then the number of jobs would be in the millions probably. I've got here on 21% would create about 9.9 million or more jobs, over 10 million jobs probably. Now, is that realistic? Probably not. Going back to our economy is so massive. 27 trillion. We could be completely self-sufficient if we wanted to. But we're not going to because we want cheaper products and things of that nature. That's fine. We consume so much in the U.S., but I can also tell you we could do so much more if we just, all we're asking for is what? A level playing field. There are things that you go into certain countries and all of a sudden there's a new regulation or whatever. How many of you enjoy exporting to Brazil? I mean, they change their stuff like, it's a raffle. It's like, we're going to hit this new regulation, and off it comes. I'll just also say that we had the 301 tariffs that came in under Trump. We had the 232s that were added and accelerated under Trump. People are trying to figure out what's going on. The whole intent, I think, was to try and get some of these folks to the table to try and negotiate something. Whether you were for Trump or not, doesn't matter. The one thing I will say, the Trump era, most compliance people nowadays are at the table at the senior levels. So whether you like them or not, or whether you agreed with them or not, the agenda is you're at the table. So here's your takeaway. We know what happened in the 4 years that Trump was president. Now he's coming back. You think it's going to get busy? I think it's like you better strap it down because it's fixing to take off. The exciting thing about that is, in my opinion, regardless of, we're going to put tariffs on everything. You know, as far as that's a negotiation, boy. That's saber rattling. We don't need to react. We need to respond. And the question is, with your own company and these trade associations and AIAG especially here, what is your top regulatory affairs agenda? If you want to see some of the tariffs or the 232s or any of that kind of stuff removed, we need to look at this holistically and maybe align with other industry groups to try and stimulate trade to say, hey, I want fair trade in Brazil or Japan or Germany or China or whoever else. So we can, we got to compete with them. They may still have a cheaper product, but we have the American product. I know some of our American products are very popular in some of the other countries, just like some of the others are in here. It's just one of those things is looking at it from a standpoint, let's just play fair. And that's all I'm trying to put forward. So with that, I may be dumb as a box of rocks. I just hope that is just a common sense way of doing it. I'm like the country boy economist here or whatever for right now. So with that, I'll leave it with you. Thank you. And we are here with the CEO of the organization. Tell folks your name and are you based here in Detroit?
Yeah, my name is Matt Pullman, the CEO here at AIG. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being part of it. Thanks for speaking to us at lunch today. You guys were great.
Oh, thank you.
It was really nice. We're AIAG. We are at our customs workshop that's going on today with a lot of speakers, a lot of stuff on forced labor and many other things. So Thanks for having us.
Well, it has been a very good conference. I will say that folks seem to be, it's about 300 folks, which is good. That's a great size because there's a lot of interaction. It's big enough that you can have a good conference, and then it's small enough that you're making contacts and whatnot. So it's been excellent.
It's a tremendous opportunity to get the industry together, especially the customs industry and the automotive space. Mm-hmm. And you come to events like this, and you look at the all the folks that are attending, and you think all these different companies. But when they're here, it's incestual. You know what I mean? Everyone knows each other. They're competitors, but they're friends.
Yes.
And it's nice. We've had events like this in the past. Mm-hmm. It's been a while since we've had one. Last year we combined it with a show. It was okay. But to get the focus just on customs, to get the Mexico, Canadian, and U.S. customs representatives here and speaking, industry folks speaking, it's been very good. I hear great things so far about it.
Well, it has been the feedback that we have been getting as we've interviewed people. I'm having a hard. It's the end of the day. I've talked so much, folks. I'm sorry. Anyway, the feedback has been great. Honestly, they're actually learning a lot from the speakers. Again, the great networking. The vendors seem to be very pleased. There's a lot of good interaction with vendors. So that's one thing. So I think next year's conference may even grow a little bit.
Well, it should. Once you get this going, they tend to grow. Mm-hmm. This is our 5th different event this year at AIG. We're in the quality space. We're in the supply chain space. Chemical compliance, IMDS. We do things in Mexico and in China. So there's a lot. And as you do these things and they go over well, and social media is making a big piece now, as that becomes a buzz, you get more people coming back the next year. So I'm very excited about that.
So let me ask this: in running a trade association like this that is so diverse in the different areas of, if you will, the industry, what's probably been your biggest challenge as you're leading this organization?
Well, I've been in the automotive industry for 40 plus years, and AIG is 42 years old this year. And we've been primarily known as a quality organization, and it's started expanding into other areas. I've been in my role for 2.5 years, and my challenge was to try to get it out of primarily quality and put more focus on some of the newer EV space, the sustainability space, and many of the other current industry issues. So if you don't know AIG, we're an industry association. Our role and our goal is to solve industry-related issues and problems with best practices and standards. We do that by bringing the best in the industry together. We have meetings like we're having right now where people talk about the problems. We listen to what they are. We have steering committees that kind of gather what they think the topics are, and then we ask, okay, if we try to solve this, will you give us your subject matter experts? And we put those people into a room once a week, every other week, or once a month, solve that problem. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing right now. Going on in that room right now is a forced labor initiative that we started a year ago, along with compliance and all the stuff that's going on with importing stuff from other places. But we're announcing 6 OEMs have come together with a common approach. We've got 4 industry IT solutions with a common solution, and then we're offering that to the industry as a common solution. The OEMs are going to put it out there, and hopefully over time that best practice will become a standard and get put in their specific requirements, and that'll hopefully, as it goes downstream through the supply chain, hopefully brings a lot of standards, but also brings compliance and helps the industry get better in solving this initiative that is pretty big, which is how do you bring stuff in and know that you're compliant?
Well, and that is a challenge. There is the working groups that you basically are putting together. Are there like a government, private sector, or is it all from your trade association right now?
Well, AIG is small. We're 50 people.
Right.
But we have at any point in time 800 volunteers and various work groups. So we have, depending on the issue we're trying to solve, but generally it's OEMs and tiers. Could be sub-tiers. Okay. Right now, this one included also the industry solution providers, because you can't solve forced labor without having information all the way down to where it comes out of the ground. And there needs to be a solution for that. So that's why we got the industry, but we also involve sometimes universities. We might involve, we do have relationships with the U.S. Customs, Canada Customs, Mexico Customs, and depending on what it is, we'll have them involved in these working groups as well.
With that, some of the service providers would be, the companies that have AI technology. It's, you've got to know where your supply chains is, Customs would say, and, tracking it out. Well, they're finding that out. Now the scenario is, as it's revealing some potential problem areas, it's now trying to say, well, now what do you do with it? And it sounds like you're taking action in that to say, okay, here's how to handle it, especially pulling those OEMs together.
Everyone's got to be compliant. Whoever's bringing it into the country has to prove compliance. And right now, I think, in general, it's you have to prove the negative, because you're assumed if it's coming from certain areas that you're guilty, and you have to prove that it's not from the forced labor. It's not from the forced labor region or whatnot. So it's hard. You have to know, and and it's complicated because it's labor, it's bad actors, it's many different pieces. And that was talked about in our the sessions today.
Yep. Excellent. Well, if somebody wants to get involved with AIAG based on what you're looking at here, and it sounds like this is a great organization, which, folks, it really is. There's some good folks in it. Who do they need to reach out to, or what do they need to do?
Well, if you get on AIAG.org, you'll find a membership area in there. You can select on that and reach out. and you'll find a way to connect to AIG. We've got a membership group that'll contact you and get back to you. But we've got close to 5,000 members. We got 38 OEMs. All the big tiers are part of it. So it's a great organization.
No, excellent.
Thank you.
If you are in the automotive industry, you are a supplier or whatever, this is an organization. If you're not already involved, you should give serious thought to getting involved with.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay. Matt, you have been
Well,
excellent. Thank you, sir.
appreciate it. Look forward to listening to you.
All right.
All right.
Thank you very much for joining us. SimplyTrade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor SimplyTrade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at SimplyTradePod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. SimplyTrade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by SimplyTrade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.